Hello, hello. Thank you all for joining today for this session, The Curiosity Code, a superpower for the future of collective giving. Let me start saying and reminding everyone that closed captioning is available. You just have to enable at the bottom of your Zoom screen. First of all, my name is Maya Jubnowski. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program manager at Philanthropy Together. We are very excited for today's session, where we are gonna to discuss why curiosity is essential to the future of collective giving and how we can use AI to expand that curiosity. So please, we ask you to engage on the chat. We will have some minutes at the end of the session with Nathan, and he will be able to answer those questions. So please engage on the chat, and also be very mindful of the We Give Summit community guidelines. Please stay with us until the end of the session because we have a big surprise. We will have a winner for $50 coupon to spend at our We Give Summit shop. We just launched that shop, so we will have a winner with that $50 card. With that said, I'm very happy to introduce today's speaker, Nathan Chappell. So welcome, Nathan.
So great to be here. Thank you, Maya. It is what an honor to be here. I've been such a big fan of Philanthropy Together and your work. I'm a product of Collective Philanthropy. Just a quick intro story. As a child, grew up in poverty, and I remember distinctly a moment where the roof in our house caved in. It was my mom and my sister and I, and it was people from our community who came together to repair that roof. And actually, I just found that just to be this amazing experience that I think was probably the most formative portion of me dedicating my entire career to the nonprofit sector. And so, absolutely a fan, and really, really honored to be here. I'm going to share my screen and guide you through. I think what will probably be a helpful kind of analysis is that I've been working in philanthropy for 20 years. I started working in artificial intelligence in 2017. And this presentation took that long to come out of me. This idea that I've been essentially working in artificial intelligence for all this time, and it finally came to me about 6 months ago that the difference between what's possible and what's not possible has nothing or very little to do with data or models or different types of AI. It has to do with our own curiosity, and this has been largely true. I've been able to work with many nonprofits throughout the country and actually beyond the U.S. In fact, our work is represented now in 118 countries, and so I'm excited to share this kind of new orientation that it took me, however long it is, 7 years to come up to, and hopefully this is a benefit to you. Curiosity is something that we all have in us, and so I'm going to really hopefully demystify what AI is. Just again, by quick orientation, I'm an entrepreneur, kind of by just my DNA, but I found myself an accidental fundraiser in the year 2000 when I was serving on a board of directors at a local Boys and Girls Club, and our director actually announced that she was moving out of state. I was young and naive enough to not say no, and ended up serving in that capacity for 7 years, and that launched into a 20 plus year career of leading nonprofits. But since that time, I've been able to write a few books and receive also a few AI patents. By day, I serve as a chief AI officer at Virtuous Software, and Virtuous is really I would argue is for the future of CRMs where we house data. And then outside of that, I get to speak on what we consider responsible and beneficial AI. So we've got some things for you, some downloads for you here to get you really started on this. So no surprise, and this sounds probably totally cliche, is that the statement that the future isn't coming, it's already here. There probably couldn't be a more cliche statement than that, but I thought this post by Adam Grant, who's a very famous best-selling author, sums up just the formative shift that we our experience in our lives. So the hallmark of expertise is no longer how much you know, it's how well you synthesize. Information scarcity rewarded knowledge acquisition. Information abundance, which is essentially what we live in now, requires pattern recognition. It's not enough to collect facts. The future belongs to those who connect dots. And I love this kind of sentiment, especially in relation to collective giving, because it's about connecting dots. It's about connecting people and connecting dots where work and effort can be amplified within a community and really transform lives. And so I felt like that was such a fitting thing where I spent most of my education and most of my career trying to be an expert in something. And to be honest, the idea of being an expert is no longer as necessary as really the ability to synthesize information and to connect dots. To give you a couple slides that are just a quick primer on what AI is, this is confusing because AI essentially is everything and nothing at this point. We, of course, know that when we buy something on Amazon and it predicts that you might be out of something or you might be interested because other people have bought that, of course, that's AI, and we're very familiar with that. But this idea that AI is essentially embedded into everything that we do. Modern AI, and this is actually just a few months ago from Jeff Bezos, the modern AI is a horizontal enabling layer. It essentially means it's in everything. It can be used to improve everything. It will be in everything. It's most like electricity. And that's a powerful statement when you think about the fact that, electricity is something that, you can have this a tool like a toaster, but it's really the electricity that makes it really amplifies its ability to work. And so the fact that AI is just in everything is now a part of life. There's huge implications to society on this, and I write on this a lot, and I talk about this a lot. And also, I remain extremely optimistic about be able to our ability to use AI to amplify our connection, to essentially put individuals at the center of that, and to help us basically scale generosity. And that's really what I'm driven by. To give you a sense of the scale of this, AI dwarfs all other technologies combined. If you are one of those people that is hoping that AI is a fad and it's going to go away, I'm sorry to disabuse you of that. It's already too late. The digital genie is out of the bottle. This is a technology that is unlike any other technology that humans ever created. And we know because of this idea that AI is an exponential technology that today is the worst AI you'll ever use. So if you haven't tried it or you don't like it, just wait a day or wait 2 weeks and there'll be a different form of AI. And that's because AI essentially trains itself. So this idea that we're living in an era where this technology and this information abundance, the ability to gather information, to share information has never been easier. When we look back 3 years from now, we will talk about, oh my gosh, that was, the Stone Ages of AI and how primitive it seemed. It also brings up a lot of philosophical questions and sediments that we have to wrestle with now that are no longer philosophical. This is coming from Mustafa Solomon. He's now at Microsoft, but he's an early, really, really formative leader in the AI space. And he says in his book last year called The Coming Wave, this is going to be the most productive decade in the history of our species. He goes on to say, it's also important for us to know when and how to say no. But when I read this statement, it really made me think about how the private sector and how, markets and capital markets will really use AI to drive more, just more of everything and more faster. But if we think about this being the most productive decade in the history of our species, we have to reflect on what it means for us. Because even though it's true that we'll most likely almost entirely be the most productive decade in the history of human species, productivity is not our goal. Human connection is. And this is where our sector has this opportunity. If we are in the business of relationships, we're in the business of connecting and improving and impact, we have the a responsibility and opportunity to really bring this back down into this idea that productivity is not our goal, but human connection is. And when people ask, can AI be, is it good or bad? Well, it's neither. It's a tool, and it's the tool in the hands of an individual, just like any other tool that you might have around your house. A hammer can be used to construct a home or hang a picture on the wall, but it also could be used to hurt someone. And so this tool does not know better, and it really will be a reflection of how we use it. But I have found that when we evaluate the appropriate use of AI, is when we put people at the center of every decision. If we continue to put people at the center of how AI is used, I think it can be a huge amplifier. And of course, this is absolute preaching to the choir, but the traditional path to expressing generosity has been completely rerouted. What we've thought about, what does a tax status mean? And we hear this a lot from Gen X and Gen Z of like, well, if I want to make an impact, and of course, the rise of collective giving is a manifestation of this. Is that what does a tax status have to do with the idea of making an impact? And so, with that said, it has opened us up to thinking about generosity and impact in such broader ways. And Philanthropy Together has been a huge part of that, to really tap into this visceral thing that humans are wired to do. We are essentially wired to be in community. We're wired to be connected to each other. And we, by our biology, have these pro-social behaviors that drive us to helping others in need. And so, with that said, we don't have to follow the traditional norm of charitable participation to a standard 501(c)(3, that we can make an impact in a variety of different ways. So many ways, in fact, that it can be completely overwhelming. The benefit to AI is that we can help use AI to just culminate all those ideas and bring them down into things that we can actually activate. So at the same time, we know that the needs have never been greater. And if even if we reflect on the first few months of this year, if the need for helping one another, if the need for support within our community was not great before, it's greater than ever. And so this is not a time for us to sit around and make this essentially not just a generosity crisis, but a crisis by consent, where we become apathetic to the needs in our community. This should be the time that we go deep. We get, I don't know, angry is probably the wrong word, but we get excited about and passionate and maniacal about our desire to make a difference in our communities. And so this is the time that we really have to do this. As I shared before, and this would be my freebie to you. If anyone wants a PDF of my book, The Generosity Crisis, The Case for Radical Connection to Solve Humanity's Greatest Challenges, it really talks about what's at stake. Feel free to just send me a DM on LinkedIn, and I will, or better yet, I'll share my email address at the end, and I will send you a copy, a PDF of that. And with you won't get spammed or anything doing that. But we came to this conclusion that while there are significant headwinds facing charitable giving, charitable participation, people are tending to move inward a bit, is that AI is probably the only scalable solution to helping reverse that. And at the end of this, I took ChatGPT and I asked it, like, if you had to sum up this book in 3 bullet points, so now you don't even have to read it. If you were going to sum up this book in 3 bullet points, what would it be? And so the book is really grounded in these 3 ideas of communicate with authenticity, harness technology for personalization so that we can scale our effort, and then focus on building community. So I think this is perfectly aligned with the We Give Summit and Philanthropy Together, and really what your intention and your work is really centered around. This time for innovation in our sector also really means that we are living in this exponential age. This exponential age as AI essentially self-improves, that incremental changes won't work. We cannot do things the same way and expect a different result. And so if there was one thing that would keep me up at night, it would be people's apathy to making change. And so this is where whether people, like my book or don't like my book, or like your work or don't like your work, it really is beside the point. The point is that if we can inspire conversation about impact and generosity and making a difference, at least we could have those conversations that we will essentially, prove our case. It's when the conversations don't happen that should make us concerned. And so I really encourage you all to continue to be the rebel rousers around generosity, even if it might be controversial, is to put things out there that require a response. Because essentially, this idea that apathy or just this crisis by consent is really what is probably humanity's greatest threat. So, if we think about collective giving in AI, I just want to give you a couple quick examples. I mean, these are super easy, and you can go into ChatGPT, talk about your work specifically and what you're trying to achieve in your community. in within your group and say, how can you help us? But if you give it a persona, like take the persona of a philanthropy advisor. What aren't we asking ourselves? And we've gotten to this point where sometimes we record our conversations within a room, and then we interrogate the conversation to say, what did we miss? We know that we have lots of bias when we talk through and start talking about things. We've always done things the same way. But if you can have a recorded conversation of your group conversation, and then you go to it and say, what did we miss? Or what were the big themes? Or what were the things that we should have talked about that we didn't? To also think about things like personalizing donor and member engagement at scale. This is around personalization. And if we could make every member feel, seen and celebrated. Prototyping new ideas. You're no longer alone in your thoughts of like, I need to come up with a new and creative idea to amplify impact in my community. You have a tool for that. And of course, like using AI as a forecaster to say, hey, what would the ripple effect if we funded this today? Like, what could the ripple effect be on that? And to really either, make adjustments or to go forward more confidently because of that. So just a couple of ideas, and those are just based on a new thought pattern. So these new tools really, they will not do anything on their own unless we expand the way we think about them. And if we think about them as a Google search or just some other type of robotic type of software application, they really won't help us. But if we really expand our thinking that we have this creative thought partner, we have this ability to use a tool that has read every single thing on consumer behavior, every single thing on philanthropy, every book really ever written, and lots of YouTube videos to really serve alongside you as this, thought partner, as this guide to support your work. It means that you have to move away from looking at AI as this blank screen with a little prompt that it can only be treated one way. I tend to think about beside on the other side of my monitor that there's a bunch of different PhDs that are just waiting to take on tasks for me or brainstorm with me, to be a creative thought partner with me, to keep me honest when I might be going down rabbit holes, to edit my work or to give me analogies for things so that I can understand things contextually. So this is it also can be very overwhelming. One of the smallest, easiest things that you could do is to take a post-it note and put it on your monitor that says, how can AI help? And if your primary orientation is how can AI help and have it prove to you that it can't, you're going to go a lot further with that orientation versus this is something that I use for a specific task at a specific time. And it really means that we have to forget what AI can do and not get caught up in all of that, but we have to focus on what needs to get done. And I find a lot of people get overwhelmed with AI because it's a tool that knows something about everything and it can create this amount of overwhelm. But if we remove that overwhelm and we identify a single problem, something that needs to get done, something that we've been challenged with, or something that we don't enjoy, it might be more mundane, that if we focus on those things that need to get done and then go to how can AI help, it will become a much easier path to kind of manifesting that partnership, that thought partner that you're looking for. There's no doubt that AI has already exceeded so many expectations at this time of what we thought it can do. We, even back a few years ago, thought that AI could not be strategic, it could not be creative, and it could not be empathetic. And of course, it's true that it can't do any of those things, but it can emulate those things extremely well. It can emulate empathy, it can emulate creativity, it can emulate strategy very well, often far better than many humans. But one thing when I thought about that, well, if it can do those things, all those things that we thought it couldn't do, what's left for us being humans? And I really began to ponder on this for weeks and months, in fact, and just, kind of was really struggling with like, what does it mean to be a core human if these bots or these models can do those other things, better than I can, what's left? And I realized that the one defining quality that humans have that AI can never have on their own is this idea of wonder. So AI can do all these things, but it can't wonder on its own. In fact, if it does wonder on its own, and I'm a believer that it will never be able to do that based on its design, this idea that if we can be the ones that wonder and then use tools to actually take that wonder into amazing things and creative things, then we're going to be far, far better off. So this really boils down my 7 years of using AI with hundreds of nonprofits. I've spoken with nonprofit professionals and donors and givers around the world. And honestly, the opportunity for what is possible are unlocked in just two words. And there are two words that you already know. And this is truly the two words that will allow us to amplify generosity in the AI age. And they have nothing to do, those two words are not artificial and intelligence, they're not data or models. These two words are something that you're born with and that you have either developed or that has diminished over time. And the two words are what if. And I can tell you, probably not surprisingly, I was a very inquisitive child. Many people would say annoying. I wouldn't disagree that I was probably one of the most annoying children on the planet. I used to ask questions about everything. And of course, there's the questions for the sake of asking questions, but then there's questions like, how do these things work and why do those things work? And I grew up, as I shared, in a single parent household. My mom didn't go to college, but she was smart enough to say, hey, there's a guy up the street and his name is Bob. And Bob was an engineer, and Bob seemed to know something about everything. And if he didn't, he had a great encyclopedia set because we didn't have encyclopedias. And anytime I would ask one of these kind of weird esoteric questions, my mom would be, go ask, need to go ask Bob. And that really became a thing for me. Like I would just, go up to Bob and I would say, "Hey, why does this thing happen?" And or, what is the history here? And we would look this up. It was really the practice of asking questions, I think, that became throughout my career probably one of my greatest assets. I thought for a long time that being kind of a Renaissance person was actually a limiting belief, that I should be an expert in one thing. And what's happened with AI is that we have now redefined what it means to be successful. The person that is a curious generalist, person that is just curious about all things, will actually go much further than a specialist that is just deep in one topic. And so this really brings us to this idea of curiosity and what does that mean and how that just these two words really unlock what's possible. And truly this idea that the limits of what's possible is only constrained by our imagination. People often will say, well, how does AI work? And I'll give you one example in a second, but like it's so limited by things that feel tangible and just this, like, I need to see a finite example of how AI is manifest in something versus everything is possible. And not to be overwhelmed with that, but to find a problem and then use AI to create that solution. So there's so much opportunity right now. I think most people grossly underestimate what is possible if we allow ourselves to be curious. And I can say, sadly, that for 20 years in my fundraising profession, that I really dismissed curiosity for the most part. I was measured by how much money we would raise in a nonprofit, and therefore I put pressure on my team to raise money. And when people would come with questions, I would say, stop asking the questions, just focus on what you need to get done. Like keep your eyes on your paper, focus on your key performance indicators. To know now that it's such a limiting belief, and what we can do is tap into our imagination and how to solve problems that are not incremental, but in radical ways. This is just one example, and this is a QR code if anyone is interested in this. But a friend of mine, Mallory Erickson, and I know she knows some of the Philanthropy Together folks, and she is a retired, well, no, I guess burned out fundraiser who just really didn't like the role. And she got so passionate about burnout and the idea of like why it's so hard to be successful asking for money, and that she wrote a book about it. And she wrote a book called What the Fundraising, and she has a podcast called What the Fundraising. She is not a data scientist. She is not a technologist. She doesn't write code. But she thought one day about 6 months ago, well, what if there is a way to use AI to help me help people practice my methodology to get better at fundraising conversations when they were nervous or they were going to ask someone for money and they were nervous. And within a few months, she has an entire platform. So someone, again, not a technologist, not a data scientist, no formal training in AI or computers, has a product because she thought, what if? What if AI could dramatically improve your ability to connect with a donor? And in fact, that's exactly what she's done with Practivated. And you should, at the very least, check out a demo of it because I want you to know that just the curious mind is really what is going to unlock the potential of generosity for us. So, when we think about when we get down to why curiosity and why it's so important, curiosity, I believe, as I shared, is a key hack in the age of AI, something that is a radical shift from how business has been conducted, how generosity has been conducted for pretty much for ages. Curiosity is something that it drives innovation just by sheer nature. I as a child, I used to come home from school every day, and my mom had instilled this thing with me. And in fact, since my mom didn't go to college, she was just always like wanted to incentivize like this curiosity in us. And at the end of the day, I have to come home from school, and she would ask me, "What is something new that you learned today?" And it was not allowed to be anything that I learned in school. It had to be something that I observed around the world. There's something about a cloud being a certain shape or an ant hill that I saw and the formation of it or something like that. And I really, I remember dreading those walks home from school, looking around, observing the world, but that's truly where innovation comes from. Innovation comes from our ability to think outside the box, to think outside of the things that we've done the same way every time. So if we're curious and we really incentivize this curiosity in us and within our teams and within our groups, we can drive innovation in ways and get us out of our head and to think beyond. So one of the most, creative, innovative people or people that I meet are the ones that can look at something from an outside perspective. AI has the benefit of being an outside perspective. In fact, with my first book, we spent so much time, it took us 2 years to write The Generosity Crisis, thinking about analogies. Here's an analogy of this thing happens, and what if it continues? What will it be like? And we sat for hours and hours. I mean, weeks would go by, and we're waiting for that epiphany of that analogy. Well, in our second book, when we needed analogies and we went to ChatGPT and it's like, hey, here's this condition. It's kind of like this. What is something from history that is like that? And we would, not surprisingly, get 20 or 30 or 50 ideas. And so being able to drive innovation at scale is huge. Of course, it creates efficiency. So efficiency might be the least sexy thing that AI can do, but it's probably one of the things that can do well, extremely well, whether it's writing a letter to getting you 80% or 90% there, to getting you out of that rut of getting something on paper, or if it's I hear this a lot where people if they're doing like a special event and they're doing a raffle or an auction basket, instead of having to type in like here's the description of what the raffle is, just take a picture of the item or the items and have say ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini write that for you. So creating efficiencies for sure. Curiosity will help you create efficiencies because you'll think of different ways to offload the mundane things. To boost creativity, for sure. This I've already talked about this. It's just a given. I use it all the time as a creative boost. And a lot of times that could be me literally talking to my ChatGPT. I use Claude and ChatGPT a lot. And I like to use voice mode. Voice mode actually gets us out of our heads, and the verbal aspect of it actually is very, very helpful. It can absolutely boost your ability to think outside the box, and you start in this iterative conversation. So I use it all the time for that. It fuels adaptability. This is something that is subtle but actually profound because adaptability is essentially change. We live in a time of exponential change. And if you like change, this is a really exciting time for you. And if you don't like change, you're probably looking, to homestead somewhere, off the grid because our world in the pace of change has never been faster. But the idea that curiosity, your willingness to think about something beyond, I'm curious about this other alternative. that truly is actually tricking your brain to think of another alternative. It actually is helping you adapt to the change because you're curious about, well, what if I did this thing? What would the end look like? And you're allowing your brain to move into a new realm and a new step forward. So it's really underrated, but really important aspect that curiosity has. It also requires critical thinking. I am like really big on this idea that we cannot allow critical thinking to be something that AI does for us, that we have to evaluate. So if we're using AI to help us be curious, it requires us to evaluate that AI to keep the human in the loop and to determine is this good or is this bad. And then the last part is that curiosity, it costs nothing. We can either, walk through our lives and just assume everything is just always the way it is and it's always the way it's going to be, or we can be curious and not settle for the status quo. We can lean in and push boundaries and color outside the lines and get outside of our own head. It's not something that we learn. It's something that we're born with. We know this because as children, we tend to experience a world through all the different senses. We bump into walls and we touch things and we smell things and we taste things. We're curious about why is fire hot or why does a bee sting or whatever it might be. And that's something that we have to re-tap into as adults because as many adults, we've just become a product of society and the way it's always been. There's a book called The Four Agreements. I think it's the Four Agreements or Three Agreements. Somebody can correct me, that I read in business school. And it was this idea that as children, we're full of unlimited potential, but that our friends and societies around us and end up shaping us and shaping our beliefs. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, those beliefs a lot of times become limited. And so that we tap into this is a Toltec wisdom of being able to go back to really not taking anything for granted, but just being curious about the world and our place in it. I think one of the biggest risks is not really thinking about our place in the world and how we interact in it. So let's not, allow the world to tame it. Let's unleash curiosity at scale and really see what's possible. Now, this would be something for you to sit around and think about on your own or during a drive. Like, what is your curiosity quotient? If curiosity was on a scale of 0 to 100 or 0 to 10, like where would you be in that? Do you find yourself to be an inherently curious person that is unsatisfied with the status quo and is just continuously looking for the new thing or a new way of doing things? Or do you fall on the lower end of that spectrum and tend to just kind of follow routine? I will tell you that the future of work and the future of giving is going to be dependent on those that are become more and more curious. And again, all those things that I just shared are the side products and benefits of curiosity. I'll get into some tips in a second on how to improve your curiosity quotient as well. So just to reframe and to frame some of what I'm sharing, we often go through life not questioning things, because it's like we know better. And I can tell you that for, a lot of my career and a lot of my even, on my personal side and my professional side, it's kind of routine. It's just like I already know the answer to this and I've done this a hundred times. I'm just going to do it the same way. But how often do we stop and stand back, like be an observer of our own work, our own lives, and question, like, you know, am I going to question things I already think I know? And I should use, quotation marks under know, because we, in fact, have tons of biases in the ways that we actually do things. So we think we know a lot more than we actually do. One of the greatest assets that you can have with curiosity is to take that step back and to look at a situation or an observation from an outside perspective. This is why having a coach or a mentor is super helpful. Somebody from the outside who is taking on a role to essentially, check you and help you see things from a different perspective. I love this sentiment that I heard a few months ago where someone was sharing, what if the worst thing that happened to you was actually the best thing that happened to you? And that really stuck with me. I thought about this for a few days. Like it changed my orientation about everything. Like what if the worst thing that happened to you was actually the best thing that happened to you? And reflecting on that, I could think about times in my career where it was the worst thing that could have happened to me. And if somebody asked me like, well, what could good could come from that? I'd be like, nothing, nothing good could come from that. But of course we know, and we have the retrospect of going through life and learning, well, I learned that I never want to be that kind of boss, or I learned that would never want to treat someone that way, or I learned whatever. And so the worst thing that happened to you actually most of the time ends up being, if we're willing to allow it, the best thing that can happen to us. And so I think really getting to this kind of constant state of questioning, what do you think you already know? This is just emulated in our desire to be comfortable and to just go through life with comfort. If I'm right-handed, I actually was born left-handed, and I was persuaded to be right-handed because there were more benefits to right-handed people. If I try to write with my left hand, it's extremely uncomfortable. If I try to pick up a spoon or write my name, it's extremely uncomfortable. But that's the way it is to learn something new. And instead, of just going through life and just doing the things that are not just that they're natural, but easier, try doing things that are hard and that like get your brain to think about something new and learn something new in a different way and really challenge again, go back to the previous going, challenge your biases about what something you always think you knew. So think about that just using, a different hand to do something and to really not embrace that as something that's difficult, but it's something to be uncomfortable with and to get better at. The other thing is this idea of what if. And of course, these are the two words that I talk about. I've already talked about this idea that, what if, what if, what if? And it turns out this is not a new thing, right? Curiosity has been since the beginning of mankind. We, wouldn't be here today if we weren't curious about different alternatives. But so much so that even in business, this has become something that has been really, really beneficial. In fact, Toyota is famously known for having this idea of what if. They are required, or essentially their ethos requires them to ask what if 5 times. So it's like, well, I want to do this thing, but what if? Well, if I could do that, then well, what if then? Okay, well, if I could do that, then what if then? And so that's the benefit of continuing to look and peel back the onion to get to the point of some looking at something from an angle that no one was considering. And this is a practice you can do freely for yourself. I walk into a meeting, I have an immediate bias of what the outcome of the meeting will be or what it ends up being. But what if I step back and think, what is an angle here that no one else will think about? Like just kind of force yourself. And if you've ever been around really creative people or really curious people, this is what they do. They have this ability to ask this question to themselves all the time. And again, that's something that you can do. And now, of course, with AI, you have this tool to help you look at and say, look, here's the situation. Help me look at this as an angle that nobody else is considering and see what it unlocks for you. And then to relearn something you already know. What if the way you've always done something isn't the best way? I can tell you that throughout my career, we've made processes for everything. We if this happens, then that happens, and that thing, then that thing, and we would just follow those processes almost to make our jobs routine. It's somehow to like to create process to make our job easier. But it's our jobs are not supposed to be easy. Like, what do we need to unlearn to really rethink, new ways of actually connecting and making an impact? And so this is all to say is that we live in an era where anything is possible. And we need to look at things from a different vantage point or multiple different vantage points and ask ourselves continuously, like, what does it mean to be uncomfortable and color outside the lines and to do things differently? So as I kind of end up here, and then we'll have a few minutes for a few questions. There are some tips. And like I said, curiosity is free. And it is the key hack that will determine the winners and losers, if you will, of those who really amplify their work with AI versus those that don't. Condition yourself to think about how AI can help. Put that post-it note on your desktop that every time you go to your computer to do something, if you're going to do something more than once ever, ask, how can I help? Challenge your biases, ask why 5 times. Color outside lines, break things. That's really breaking things. I'm really resembling this idea of like the clarity of a beginner's mind. When you start a brand new job, you have total clarity about like what I should do and what the organization needs to do to actually change. So be willing to practice that beginner's mind. At the end of the day, ask yourself, ask your friends, ask your kids, ask your family, what surprised you about the world today? If you don't have anyone to ask, ask yourself, like, what surprised me about a situation or the world today? And then, like I said, we're embraced with a technology that knows something about everything. It's the worst that it will ever be. Assume that anything is possible. You can celebrate questions as much as answers, provide space for experimentation, create values that seek to understand and not defend, recognize and reward creative risk takers, embrace technology, embrace that today is the worst technology you'll ever use, and assume AI can be helpful until proven wrong. There's a couple, just one last statement. The culture of curiosity doesn't happen by accident, happens by design. To amplify impact in the AI era, reward questions as much as answers, embrace experimentation, and celebrate curiosity as your innate human superpower. I'll leave you with a QR code you can download. I put together 50 AI tools for nonprofit success. I just put this together about a week ago, so it's hot off the presses. It is essentially entirely free guide so that you can demystify all the things I was just telling you about. And you can look at the tools, they're categorized by what their use case is and also what their application is. And of course, I'm happy to share this deck and connect with anybody on LinkedIn. And here is, I'll just say this again. Here's my cell phone number. Here's my email address. If you'd like a copy of the Generosity Crisis, just send me a note and I will send you a PDF. And at the very least, I'm going to ask you how you shared this with somebody or how you sparked a conversation around generosity to those around you. So I think I'm done with time right on the moment 1:42 where we plan to have a few minutes for questions. And Sarah, oh my gosh, so good to see you. I didn't know you were going to be on here.
Nathan, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. And Nathan and I have been like fans of each other work for many years. And we finally got together on a panel last year. Was it last year?
Yeah.
Last year in New York. And the moment we were thinking about, this session, I said, I know who is the best person to lead this session. So thank you so much for this super useful information. Like, I have been on the chat, like checking what everybody's saying. And I would just like open it up for Q&A. There are a few questions in the Q&A window. I don't know if you can see them, if you can address those. And I'm going to just check on the chat if I see another one that is not here. Um, Everybody on the audience, if you have a question, if you put a question on the chat, please put it on the Q&A window so Nathan can see it. And I'm just
Yes.
going to be quiet.
No, thank you, Sarah. And you know what? I think I spent a lot of time on the data sciencey side, right? I've been like super nerdy in AI and had to do all the hard things and realized that the difference between those that really amplify their work are really have very little to do with what tools they're using. It has much more to do with their curiosity of like, yeah, what if I could use AI to do this? And when you overcome that barrier of like, I don't need to be a data scientist, like I don't need to know how to build a microwave. I just need to know how to use it. Like, and I need to know like if it's working well, my food's hot, and if it's not working well, so it's like I think it really demystifies it and lowers the bar there. So,
Totally.
yeah.
And it's like a practice, right? Like I remember the very first few times that I used ChatGPT, I was like, oh my God, what is this? I don't even know how to ask. And, the more and more I use the tool, the better I become at also, saying, okay, that doesn't make any sense, or that doesn't, I don't agree with that. And also kind of saying, I want to have like an intellectual sparrow partner, right? Like, do not
Right.
always agree with me. Like, so
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, it's really, I mean, if it, to have that coach. So there are a couple questions. I'll address some that I get a lot. So one is about the environmental costs. So we work in the, kind of the social sector, the social good sector, and we don't want to do things that have inadvertent harm or cause, do something that helps us in the short term but has long-term effect. And I equate this similar. In fact, AI will be the biggest breakthrough to clean energy that any technology has ever had. One is that it's helping us identify ways to create clean energy, but also the demand for energy of AI's use is forcing organizations to think about fusion and other like really, really cool ways of actually creating energy. So right now there is a big environmental impact. That will become less as the models become much, much more efficient at a scale of like 100 to 1 more efficient. At the same time, it will lead to breakthroughs in clean energy. But we as consumers need to make it known that environmental impact is important to us. And so while the internet, when it came out, was all harvested on just raw, regular power, now as a consumer, I have many URLs. I have about 100 domain names. I collect them like business, like baseball cards, I think. They're all powered by wind power. So all of my domain names are powered by a company that only uses wind to power their domains. We have lots of choices now. And with AI, we don't, but we have to put that political pressure on, the public pressure on organizations to, make sure that our voice is heard.
Advocacy, 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 right? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Don't let us be quiet on that front. And the other, question, there's a lot of questions on like, have you ever used AI in a certain way? One thing that I think one of the lowest hanging fruit things that they can do is if you're new to AI and you're curious about it enough that you want to try it, is to describe your role. It's like, or something that you're trying to do. And if you don't know if AI can help you, just ask it, right? Because AI has read every book on human psychology. It's read every book on consumer behavior, every case for support, every, grant applications, anything that was public on the internet, it's read. And I've been, even me, surprised, like it's a 20-year fundraiser, how well AI knows my work. And so the number one thing that you should do is like describe your job as like, can versus, asking someone else, can AI do this? Just go to AI and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, and here's, my role in this. What are the ways that you can actually help me? And I think you'll be like really blown away by the answer. So much of that has to do, again, with not understanding how to write a perfect prompt. And there's about 10 million YouTube videos for that. But it's about the curiosity of like, hey, I wonder if you could help me with this thing. And just starting there. And I see and people say, what if, what if, what if, and continuing to create that iterative kind of path forward. So um, yeah, I mean, as far as our sector, and there's one other question on can funders increase appropriate use of AI to make the social sector more productive? There's no doubt, right? Whether it's just creating efficiency by evaluating, applications, or it's around personalization or helping, write letters. 100% there. I mean, we can create efficiencies. In fact, you don't have to take my word for it. There's a very large study that Harvard Business School just did with about 1,000 employees at Procter and Gamble. And one is that people used AI, performed almost as well as teams by like working together without AI. But they also experience emotional benefits because they using AI actually has the same mental effect of like doing something with somebody. So you had like this kind of thought partner with you. And so creating, essentially the benefit of doing work better, like higher degree of accuracy, doing it faster, and at the end being happier is something that's been replicated pretty much across every domain, whether it's college students or white collar workers. So if you're in a position where you need to do work better, faster, and be happier in the end, if you're not, I want to know your secret sauce because like I just want to follow you around. But if you could benefit from doing work better, faster, and being happier in the end, this is can be absolutely be a tool for you.
Totally. And I see, Nathan, that people are still putting questions, but I'm going to pass it to Maya because
Yeah,
we are going to have a community conversation with Nathan after this. So if you are interested about ethics of AI and continue the conversation
yeah.
around AI, join that breakout room. But Maya, do you want to um
Yes.
where are
Thank
you?
you.
Yes.
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me? Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Nathan. This was amazing. I think everyone wants to hear more. So thank you so much. First of all, please, I'm going to ask everyone to answer these 2 question poll that we will be launching right now, that allow us to keep creating amazing content for you all. I'm also announcing the raffle winner is Shunketa Cunningham. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right. We will be in touch with you. And as Sarah mentioned, please stay on. We have the next session. It's a new session at the WeGive Summit. It's called Collective Conversations. We will have 3 different collective conversations. One is reimagining corporate philanthropy. The other one, if you want to continue the conversation with Nathan, he will be hosting the conversation called Going Beyond AI Ethics. And we will have another conversation hosted by Amanda and Imani that it's called Sustaining the Work When Burnout is Real. So thank you again, and I hope to see you in one of the 3 collective conversations. Thank you.